you, by the way.
Look, this is going to be fun for Tottenham fans this season under Ange Postecoglou, isn't it?
I don't know about fun.
They're going to be fun moments, maybe.
I think the contrast from Conte is going to be fun. They're going to see it as fun. They're still going to want results at the end of the day, you know, and they've started well enough. Brentford was a decent performance. They got the point, and then, to come back at home, where Man United in the last 4 or 5 seasons have had great results against Tottenham. So it was always going to be a tricky one. So to go on the front foot and play as well as they did, I think the first 20 minutes or so, they looked pretty open. They looked too open for my liking. And I think Ange would look at that and think, well, against better opposition, the top teams, we might have to just rejuggle our way we play against them. But it's front foot football, which I think Spurs fans want. They've got pace in the team now, in the midfield. They've got legs and pace, and they've got defenders that want to defend high up. So it allows him to do his pressing higher up the pitch. You can only do it. Liverpool, at their very best, when they were pressing years ago, they had to play a high line. It was a risk, but they did it well. They've gone off that a little bit. I think they've got caught out a little bit too much on that nowadays. But to press, you've got to squeeze up the pitch. And if he wants that, against the top teams as well, that'll be the big test when Spurs play. But yes, at the weekend they were excellent. I thought second half particularly, playing with a lot of confidence.
Yeah, that second half performance is what he'll want more of as the season goes on. But it just the reception from the Spurs crowd as well. It was just, I've not heard the new stadium like that. It's certainly not at that level. Probably since it opened, just the positivity, I think.
I think it's, and as Glenn said there, the football that they're watching, I don't think they enjoyed the Mourinho style. They certainly didn't enjoy the Conte style. Even though these guys are serial winners, they just didn't enjoy what they were watching. But I think looking at Ange Postecoglou, his football is almost like Pochettino's football, where it's on the front foot, pressing high up, legs, pace, energy. And I think he's got even in such a short space of time, we're seeing Basuma playing now all of a sudden, who for whatever reason last season wasn't getting much game time. He's looked really good. Romero, again, it's only 2 games in, but he looks a little bit calmer, because there was times at last season where he was a little bit on the border of getting sent off. So I think what they've got under Ange Postecoglou now is that identity of how they're going to play now. It looks fantastic and it will be fun to watch, as you said. But when they come up against sides that are better than them with the ball, I don't think they can go as gung-ho as they did, certainly the first 2 games. Yeah,
maybe that was, you're right. From a Spurs fan's perspective, it might be a little bit nervy to watch, but from a neutral's point of view, that's what's going to be exciting, seeing a team that are just going to be front foot.
Yeah, it is that. But I also think that they have that physicality and they have a quite good fitness conditioning at the moment, especially when you contrasted that to what was going on at Manchester United and their midfield, and it sort of looked lethargic. And really not understanding of what was required of them from a tactical point of view, especially off the ball. But I see with what you've got, that what Ange has managed, Postecoglou managed at Tottenham, is the balance that there is. It's Basuma as well as Sarr, and how they would understand their roles to allow Maddison to have the ball, to be able to create what he is able to create. And I think that the way that it works in the middle is really wonderful to watch. It's just the fitness conditioning that allows them to play that consistently. That's the thing that we have to question. But otherwise, they've produced more passes than even Pochettino managed. Obviously, it's a small sample size. We are looking at a very big career for Pochettino at Spurs, but you can see it's on the front foot. But I do think that if the midfield works as hard as it can, you've still got Bentancur coming back in who can keep the ball, then perhaps they can continue to play this way and actually secure that defence.
Mina mentioned James Maddison, and on this, we don't need to keep saying it. We know it's only 2 games, but on this evidence, he looks born to wear the shirt. He seems to have slotted in perfectly.
Kelly, I wanted him to come to Tottenham as a Spurs man 3 years ago and to play with Harry Kane. That would have been exciting. And I think Spurs, well, who knows where they could have gone with that. Unfortunately for Maddison, he's coming, but Kane's gone. He's had 2 weeks pre-season with him, which would have been fascinating to see how they would have linked up. But no, for me, he's a top player. I think Tottenham's a good move for him. I think if he'd have gone to any of the top 4 teams that had made the Champions League or whatever this year, I think you'll see him get into the England side ahead of other players, in my opinion. I think he's that good. At the moment, Gareth has seen him playing for Leicester, who were struggling last year down the bottom. He still was producing a lot of creativity in a struggling team. I think at a top-level team, I think, for me, he would go ahead of Mount. He would go and be up there with Grealish, challenging and Foden's and the elks of that, I think he could get himself in that England team. So if he has a good season for Tottenham, they still haven't had a striker score a goal yet, which is going to be the problem. How are you going to replace Harry Kane? You're not going to replace him with an individual. You've got to collectively get goals. So it's, in a one way, it's good that defenders have scored and midfield player has scored. But, you know, they need strikers. They need Son back playing well. And I think, you know, Maddison will now say, look, Son's the one that I've got to get this little bit of like De Bruyne had with, well, he's out injured now, but with Haaland.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, if they get that going, then Tottenham could have a really good season.
Yeah, that relationship is one that's going to be crucial to Spurs as the season sort of progresses. But Glenn was saying there about England selection, and we showed the comparison with Mason Mount, who's had a slower start to life at Manchester United. I mean, how much of that is down as well to the fact that the team as a whole haven't played well in these opening 2 games? Well,
I don't think at the minute Manchester United have got the balance right in midfield. You've got Casemiro, then you've really Mason Mount and Bruno, they're 2 number 10s. They're both flying forward, so there is no real balance. There's spaces everywhere, and Mason Mount's not been able to get on the ball as much as he'd have liked. But it is early days. I know he's gone for a lot of money, and there were question marks around the transfer as well. But Mason Mount is good enough. He's been around. He's won big trophies there. He's been Chelsea's Player of the Year a couple of times as well. Like, he will get better. But I think until they can find a balance, because at the minute, as you saw against Tottenham, certainly second half, Spurs were just running through Manchester United. They weren't even there.
Wolves,
even against Wolves, more so. Yeah. So it's one of them where they're going to have to find the balance. Now, Mason Mount might find himself having a stint out wide at the minute, because you look at United's situation, Rashford's playing down the middle, doesn't look comfortable. Anthony and Jadon Sancho haven't got going yet since they've been at Manchester United. And on that left side, Garnacho, who I was excited about, he hasn't got going yet. So I think Mason Mount might find himself wide, and then maybe bringing in someone else who's not so much a number 10, like an Eriksen who's in between, because at the minute, playing this particular formation, this brand of football that Erik Ten Hag wants to play, it's not suiting him. And he's getting exposed every single time out of possession, not with the ball, but without the ball.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it seems a little bit unfair because, you know, these players that are doing so well are all in attacking teams where they've managed to give them the ball. So Maddison, you know, if you're not having Sarr and Basuma, then you also have Destiny Udogie, who's just so vertical and desperate to get up there. So he looks good because he's with a team that's on the front foot right now, that looks solidified in the midfield. But with Mason Mount, he's a hard worker and he is very capable on the ball. We've seen that, and he's capable off the ball. But when your team has so many attackers that the balance is thrown in Manchester United, you look at that team and I just think I need more defensive bodies in there in the middle. I need more, I don't know, I would need a Kante sort of thing, or you don't?
Yeah, no, I think they've got the right player in Casemiro. How can I put this diplomatically? He looks like he's had a good summer.
Yeah.
He's come back a little...
Leggy, really leggy.
He looks leggy. There was no energy there.
Yeah.
The Spurs, you're right what you said, Mina, about the energy Spurs had, the legs that they had in there.
Physicality.
The second half, there was no way Man United were going to turn that game round, because one, to combat and go 50-50, toe-to-toe, is one thing. But when you're losing a game, you've actually got to go past that. You've got to go the extra mile. And they didn't have the legs. They seemed very... And it's amazing. You're talking about a Man United team, early in the season, didn't look fit enough to me.
But this was the case last season when they started really slowly, and there were big question marks being asked of Erik Ten Hag about some of the players they brought in. This year, they've had their manager there for over a season now. They haven't really made massive changes. Only Mason Mount really has come into the outfield. I know they've brought an Arne in goal. So it shouldn't really be that difficult to know where his fitness standards are, what he wants from his squad. It's not like they're adapting. There's some teams we're looking at and saying it'll take a little. Maybe Poch at Chelsea, maybe looking at Ange Postecoglou at Spurs. There are changes that they will want to make. You feel like they should know at Manchester United now?
I think they should. And I think when Højlund comes back, the centre-forward who they signed, I think he'll make a... He doesn't want to play centre-forward. No. Like, it's quite evident in the first 2 games. He doesn't look like he's happy up there. He's not comfortable with his back to goal. He's happy up there. He's not comfortable with his back to goal. He wants to come off the left. So I think you move him to the left and Højlund down the middle, then the balance of that front 3 kind of takes care of itself. But you're right, with the recruitment as well, Mason Mount coming in, they just look like they haven't got that, as Glenn said there. But when it comes up to when Spurs have got the ball pressing, getting in their faces, running, tracking runners, it's almost like once you bypass their midfield, that's it, you're at the back 4.
Yeah.
And there's no way Casemiro can get back in there. Bruno doesn't really have the licence to get back in there. Mason Mount. So he hasn't figured it out yet.
That's the player. Last year, Casemiro was brilliant. And we all know that, with the ball, with the defensive ability, the way he read the game. He's come back. These first 2 games against Wolves and Tottenham, he's nowhere near that whether once he gets going, maybe the team will then collectively get going. I mean, it's amazing to say, but he's in the hub of the team. He's so important last year to the balance of that midfield. When you've got an offensive midfield, but you've got somebody that can do both jobs, as well as, like, Fernandes is more offensive, Mount is probably more offensive-headed, you know, in his mentality. If they all work together, then you get the energy, then you get the defensive responsibility sorted out. At the moment, they're working as individuals, but for me, Casemiro is so important for him that he gets back on the horse, starts playing how he did last year, and I think you'll see an elevation in their performance. You'll see United getting back to where they were, but I think you make a good point with Rashford. But
can I not just ask? Can we not ask questions of Erik ten Hag? Because he's seeing Casemiro in training every day, and you see we're doing a lot of defensive work at the moment. So perhaps throw in another body until you get to the fitness levels capable of you. You get to the fitness levels capable of you right now. There's too many attackers on the pitch. With you have two, like I agree with you, Darren, you know, two number 10s. You're asking this one man who is 31 years old, who's obviously had problems in the first game, change, allow him. I don't, you know, at least, I mean, he had Fred last season, he had players alongside him, and he was fantastic. But when you were isolating him and giving him that much work to do at a time when he's not looking his best, then I think you need to adapt the team to create sort of a more defensive unit, at least in the middle, or one that can hold ground, because right now it's easy as water to go through them, and I find it amazing that nothing really changed.
Well,
you might see McTominay.
McTominay, sitting there. He was on the bench, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Bring him in, you know?
May bring, Fred came in at times, didn't he, last year with that? But you might be right. But for me, I'd be saying, is Casemiro fit enough? He's come back, not looking anywhere near the player that he was at the end of the season. And he was different class. He really was in his defensive play and the use of his ball, everything that he did. He was always going back in. They tried to protect the back four a little bit more against Spurs because they were so open against Wolves. But he actually just couldn't have the legs to get into those positions and do his midfield part and then drop in when he needed to in between the two centre-backs. So he has got a problem, and you might absolutely be spot on there, Mina. Put another body in there. Eriksen. Is Eriksen going to go in there and play? He can play in a deeper role. Still a very offensive player.
Keep holding the ball.
But, you know, and when United are playing well and they're confident and they've got points on the board, and then that midfield that we saw, that three, could work really well. But at the moment, they're going through a little bit of a dodgy time. He might have to just tinker with it a little bit to get a few results.
I just want to ask you about not necessarily about the penalty decision, but the reason I want to look at it is because of the reaction of Bruno Fernandes in the post-match interview. So the Manchester United captain said afterwards.
We had a penalty that should be awarded to us, and I want to see if this week they will talk about that for a whole week, as they did last week. It's a clear penalty in every league. Don't start with that things that in the Premier League we don't give. No, the rules are the rules. Handball is a handball. That's no point for doing all the meetings they want us to do, captains, and after they do all the team with the PFA, with the referees, with everything, and after they want to make their own rules. The rules have to be the same everywhere.
So he's making comparisons to the penalty incident in their opening game against Wolves, and the penalty. And there's been a lot of discussion about it over the week. They're not comparable situations. They're not comparable situations. They're in very different circumstances. So what I want to ask is, if that's what you want your captain to be coming out and saying, if you're a Manchester United player, a Manchester United fan, do you want your captain to be coming out swinging for your team, or do you want something a little more measured? What do we think about it?
Well, it's funny how things just swing in roundabouts, because obviously they get away with one at Wolves and then they don't get given this one at Spurs, and it's one of them. I've not got a problem with him coming out and saying that. When you look at it, I'm glad it wasn't given, because it's almost like, where's he supposed to put his hands? He's making himself bigger. It hits his hand, but I think it then goes back to consistency, and I think that's where their frustration comes from, because you don't give that penalty, which is probably, I'm glad it wasn't given. But then you look at the Lewis Dunk situation at Brighton, where it hits his back arm elbow and they give it. I think that's where the frustration is coming from players, because there's no consistency. Like, that's not given, but they give one against Lewis Dunk, which probably isn't one either.
But the two Manchester United, or the two ones that involved Manchester United this season, were not the same.
No, they weren't. No, they weren't the same.
Yeah. I mean, the goalkeeper's come out and
clattered somebody.
He clattered, and the centre back has come up, and that's completely different to that. And in the rules, it is about distance.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, Fernandez there, I think he's emotional. They've lost the game. He's come out there. He was actually quite calm. I thought he probably might have said some other things, but he didn't. He said it in a constructive way. But that is all about distance. If that's deliberate handball or handball, you know, we might as well give the game up. Because and whether that's any team going forward in this season, if it's that distance away, and someone's shooting at goal and the hand, you know, if the hand goes up to stop it, that's different. But that's not a penalty in the rules, and they made the right decision up there. Well done.
Yeah. but even if you're making yourself sort of a little bit bigger. You know?
No, but they also say, look, listen, you have to defend that shot now. We have to really to take anything away. You've got to have their arms behind their back. You cannot go across as a defender to try and close somebody with your arms running behind your back. You've got to teach young kids to do that. To be a good defender, you've got to play with your arms behind your back. And the referees are telling us, we don't want you to do that. That's not what we want you to do. But if that proximity is so close, it's a yard away, someone's shooting at goal, it's going to go with force, and that hits the hand, then that's not deliberate handball. That shouldn't be handball in any team, not just Tottenham. Yeah. If it was at the other end, I'd be saying exactly the same. But for Fernandez to come out and say that, as a manager, I'd probably say, well, it was my job to come out and say that. He's emotional, but I don't think he's got a leg to stand on, quite frankly. I think it was the right rule there, and I think the goalkeeper, Onana, just totally took out the Wolves defender, and that should have been a penalty.
Yeah, maybe the Lewis Dunk one wasn't made such a big deal of because they went on to win the game, right?
Yeah.
So it's a different situation, and hopefully that's the outlier, and you know, common sense prevails over the course of the season. Coming up next, because they have looked sensational so far.